Welcome everyone. My name is Faulkner. I'm the Online Event Coordinator for Staff Development for Educators, and I'd like to thank you for joining us today for Centers in a Snap Pre-K through 3 with Donna Whyte. Before we start, there are a few things you should know. To allow for Donna to be heard clearly, we do place the attendees on mute. Please use the questions text box on your screen throughout the webinar to ask any questions. These will be used for our Q&A period at the end of the presentation. The session is being recorded, and assuming no technical difficulties, you will receive a link to the archive within 48 hours, as well as a link to a certificate of participation that you can download and print. Finally, at the end of today's presentation, you'll receive a short survey, and by completing the survey, you do assist us in providing future complimentary webinars. Now a little bit about SDE. At SDE, we believe educators have the most important job in the world, and it's why it's our mission to empower pre-K through 12 educators across the country with sustained professional development solutions that are not only research-based and rigorous, but also practical, innovative, and fun. Our goal is to help you create environments that prepare your students for the evolving demands of the 21st century. Together, we can create extraordinary classrooms. We're pleased to have Donna Whyte joining us for today's webinar. Donna is an education consultant well known for her practical and motivating strategies designed to help children reach their full potential. She combines her experience in teaching pre-K through grade 6 with her positive attitude, high energy, and practical ideas, creating exciting presentations for teachers eager to enhance their programs. Donna is the author of several books and CDs, including the highly acclaimed Teacher Resources, You Can't Teach a Class You Can't Manage, and the recent reprint of Morning Meeting, Afternoon Wrap-Up. Welcome, Donna. At this point, I'm going to turn the presentation over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me for this webinar on centers. Always a great topic, always a tough one to get through in a few minutes, but I hope to give you some thoughts and pointers about centers in your own classroom. I'm just going to have you imagine for a minute that you have planned an awesome lesson where students work and learn together. In this wonderful, thought-out plan, the students are engaged in centers, coaching and helping one another. They're growing as a classroom community. And then I'm going to ask you, it sounds like a utopia, doesn't it? So why don't these lesson plans work? And so if you're with anyone else or you're just doing a bit of self-reflection, I wondered if you can think to yourself, why is it that so many people tell me it's so hard to get those children out there practicing, extending concepts without disrupting others, without coming to you for help? Why is it that our plans don't work? And I think one of the things that we can look to is that we have traditionally in the United States thought of centers as a place that has new materials and activities, it changes with themes, it's used as a supplement or an extension of something that we've taught. And a lot of the times under those centers, teachers say without monitoring, children are not able to carry through and do those activities by themselves. Now, lots of people refer to centers as workstations or workshop type of activities in classrooms, and that's because really our whole mindset about what a center is has changed. So while I still refer to them as centers, I do notice that there are a lot of people on the road who will refer to them as a workstation or a workshop type of structure. This is because the mindset has changed to this is reinforcing work from your instruction. Good teachers, we model, we guide practice, and then we set you out there to see if you can do it on your own. Centers became that area where we want to reinforce that work and get you doing it on your own. When you can master that curriculum on your own, that's when you've really learned it. These centers, workstation type of areas, don't change every week like they used to. I can remember in the first years of my teaching career constantly on the weekends worrying about what's going to be in the centers for next week. Now, people have said changing them every week leads to lots of issues when setting up centers, mainly because kids don't know what to do, and we give small children too many directions. And so these centers are set up. While the content might change, the basic structure of the center itself does not change. It's used as an integral part of your instructional plan. This is where they will practice what I have taught them. And so most weeks it's as natural as looking at that lesson plan and extending it out to what will be the practice activities that align with that plan. Teacher instruction is a station. It becomes that we're meeting with small group, we're testing individuals, so we can't possibly be out there monitoring all the centers as we did in the past. So it's a much different setup now, I think in so many ways, much, much better and much, much more meaningful to the children in our classrooms. There's some basic principles that I always look at when I talk about centers or anything else that happens in a classroom. One of those basic principles is I think we have to look at management as a whole in a class, not just management during center time. See, people will say, well, they can't be independent, but all day long they're not independent. So why would we pick 1/2 hour or hour a day and say, now you need to be independent? Management is about good choice, bad choice. When you make good choices, you get to make your own. When you make poor choices, someone else makes them for you. And centers is no different from that. There's going to be kids who know how to make good choices. There's going to be kids who make poor choices. When they make the poor choices, those are the kids that need most of our support and most of our planning ideas to go into how do we get those kids to stay on target. If we're managing everyone in the class, we don't have time to manage the ones that need us most at the level that they need. And instead, I'm looking for who's already making good choices, who needs to make better choices, and how do I redirect some of that energy. Certainly, the thought should always be, don't assume a thing. Don't assume they know where to get paper. Don't assume that they know what to do if they have a question. Don't assume because you said so they will stay away from your table. Everything you want done independently with young children should be taught. Responsibility can and should be taught. But I don't leave anything to guesswork. Well, you should have known that. Nope. I taught you it, so I can refer back to when I talked about it or back to when we created that anchor chart that let you know if you need help, these are the things that you can do. If you are done, these are the things that you can do. So that there's not a lot not addressed proactively so that we don't have to be reactive on the spot when it doesn't work out. But when I talk about responsibility can and should be taught, I'm in buildings day in and day out through the year talking to teachers about how do we get kids independent. Let them try. Let them do. And while we all say, oh, I want that to happen. I want them to be independent. I want them to do it themselves. I have some pictures. Let's take a peek here. Responsibility. Not only is she doing whatever is being done at the yellow desk, but the little boy at the red desk is now beginning to question what he's doing. And it looks almost like he's just going to copy whatever the teacher says to do. The next picture is actually a photo that I took in a school. If this doesn't scream enabling, I don't know what does. Not just one teacher is tying the shoes. 2 teachers are tying this child's shoes while she stands there. None of this, to me, screams responsibility. When the teacher's erasing it, when the teacher is physically doing the activity for them, they learn very quickly, just sit back and wait. Someone will do it for you. So figuring out all the way from the time they walk in the door until the time they go home, how do we instill independence, responsibility in kids will totally enable us to set up the centers of our dreams. So responsibility needs to be taught. What if it doesn't work? People will say to me, I did this, and these centers still are not working. And my answer is always the same. Don't give up. Kids can learn. We all know that. It might take longer to teach some of the kids, but they all can learn. And what I look for is if it doesn't work, you go back and you reteach. So you're in centers and kids are coming to your table while you're working with your reading group or individual students. Then they have not learned what to do when I'm not available. I have to go back. I have to reteach that. So it is a matter of what kind of upfront commitment do I make to these to ensure that they're successful for the rest of the year? People say, I don't have a lot of time up front. When we get to school, we have to get going right away. People are snapping their fingers. But the truth is, you will pay that back in minutes all year long when they don't know what to do. It is worth putting it in proactively to make sure that they take on that responsibility during center time. Getting started, I think first of outlining what are the centers and why do we need them. I started a long-term contract recently in a public city school, a large public city school in the United States, and one of the first things that I would ask kids is why they were doing things. Why are you writing? Why are you working with words? It broke my heart to hear so many of the kids tell me, I'm doing it because my teacher told me to. Well, why would your teacher want you to work on these words? I don't know. Well, there must be a reason why she thinks these words are important. One little girl told me, I don't think she does, but she wants me to stay away from her table. Kids have to know why they do what they do and why it's important. Connect it to their lives. We work on words because when we work on words, we have more vocabulary, which allows us to talk to more people and know more of what's going on. We work on words so that we can become better readers. Why is it important to be a reader? Someday you might want to take your driver's test and you'll have to be able to read it. There's lots of reasons why we do the things we do with kids in schools. We need to give them an immediate connection of why it would be important to them. So while I might say you're someday going to take your driver's test, I also want to remind them, do you ever go out? Do you want to be able to order your own food on a menu or to read a flyer about a lost dog? And you want to immediately connect it to them. When we do, we have commitment on their part. Why is it important? We're much more likely to be committed to that task. All of us, not just the children. That we introduce one center at a time and that we make sure they understand this center is reading. What does reading look like? What does it sound like? When we go to writing, what does writing look like? What does it sound like? If we have a vocabulary center, now basically there's 3 ways to learn vocabulary. You read, you hear vocabulary words, or you're specifically taught. When you look at how we're taught vocabulary, that even comes down to there's specific ways that people take on vocabulary long term. Getting those into a center and making them a part of the children's day are important to that long-term success. So we're going to look at vocabulary in a minute, but introducing that one center at a time, because if they can't handle one, they sure can't handle choosing 3 or 4, just one at a time. That we develop Smarty Power. I call my kids my Smarties. Several of my books refer to my Smarties in my classroom. And Smarty Power is being able to do something people refer to as stamina. Daily 5 calls it stamina. I call it Smarty Power. Your ability to be a Smartie, stay on task, and do the very best you can with that task. And so as you begin to put the centers out, that you start to keep track of how many minutes can they last. You color them in. You get them committed into it. Boys and girls, do you think we can last 5 minutes today? I worked with a kindergarten classroom last week where I asked them, they were up to 8 minutes, and I'm disappointed. I said, really, by this time I would expect you to have 15. But I'm only visiting for today, and I'm sure you can't get to 15 today. They told me that they could, and in fact, in the end, they did. So I think that it comes down to their commitment, but they need a visual reminder of where they are and what is the goal of where you want them to be in terms of time working independently. That I look at getting started and say, okay, I decide on foundation centers. To me, foundation centers are important because I need to make sure that I have as little work as possible so that I can put time and energy into what I do as remediation or in my reading lesson. So in deciding on a foundation center, like words, we're always going to have words, whether those words are vocabulary, those words are spelling words, those words are writing your name in kindergarten, those words are high-frequency sight word types of words. There's words, so words become a center. how we practice words can look different. And I love to give choice. So choice provides motivation for kids. It's always better to let them decide. Listen, hon, you can either write those words in sand writing, or you can do vanishing letters, which is an activity that we do where the letters disappear off the chalkboard. They're written in water and lemon, and they disappear as the air hits them. But when a child says, I don't like sand writing, it's best to have the backup plan of, okay, then don't do that one. You can choose vanishing letters. Kids like choice. It motivates them to stay and actually work at a center when they feel like they have some say in what they're doing at that center. If it's vocabulary, basically, if you look to the lower left, you see the flat book that says write the word, you come up with synonyms or antonyms. Many of us picture our words. When people say certain things to us, we picture those words. If I say, I have a lazy brother-in-law, and you don't know my brother-in-law, you might picture someone that's lazy that you know, because we match our vocabulary to the picture in our mind. And then getting your vocabulary in your own words. No crossword puzzle, no search and find the word is going to teach you vocabulary. Like finding words that are like it, or exactly opposite, putting it in your own words and picturing it. So if I say to the kids, you can do the vocabulary wheel or the fortune teller. I have girls all the time say, I'm not doing the wheel, I'm doing the fortune teller. And it doesn't matter which one they do because they're all the same activities. It still involves finding synonyms, antonyms, when they're in kindergarten, I have them draw pictures, getting it in your own words. It won't ever involve look up the definition and write it out. Because I know lots of kids who look up the definition, write it. I ask them what the word is, and they say, you don't have to read it, you just have to copy it. So we want activities that absolutely give that choice, but also focus in on what is the learning standard that we want them to meet. Being proactive about things like, what do you do when you're done? We shouldn't ever hear a child come to us and say, well, what do I do when I'm done? Because if they're asking that, then we didn't do a good job of being proactive in our setting up of the centers and saying, we've got to cover all the bases. What do you do when you're done? Well, think about your own classroom. What are my choices? In our classroom, one of my pet peeves around the country when I visit classrooms is to say to people, I don't want to ever hear people say to small kids, if you're done, sit down and get a book. It sounds like a punishment, and to me, so many kids don't value that as an extra activity that you can do. I call it go to the living room. We have a place in the room that's set up kind of like a living room. You can take a clipboard and write there. You can go to the living room and enjoy a magazine or looking through our scrapbook or reading a book. There's lots of choices in the living room. You might say get a pencil or play math games, work on your popcorn words, the words that keep popping up, help a friend. Whatever your choices are, they should be posted. They should be on the wall where they become an anchor. A child says to you, I'm done, you just point to it and don't say anything back. You know what your choices are. And if you feel like, well, every day 15 kids tell me they're done and they don't do the choices, then we back up and we reteach. So it is coming, full circle and saying, I will teach it. If it doesn't sink in or they don't do it, I will reteach it and we'll start again. So answer those questions proactively. Other ones might be, what do I do if I need help? Well, if you need help, normally, again, in the newest form of centers, the teacher is busy. She's working at a table, she's working with a group or an individual, and so letting them know what are the signals. You might say, I have a clothespin. I put the clothespin on not available. That means don't come to the table unless you're bleeding or crying. There isn't any reason for you to be at the table. The next one, if you have the clothespin on, quick question. I pasted little yellow feet to the floor near my table. Quick question does not mean you can scream at me across the room. It means that you come to the yellow feet. I'm on a quick question, so you may ask me a quick question. Can I read the book to you? No, because that's not a quick question. And so getting them used to, this is just you are stuck on one thing or you just need to know something. quick question. And if my clothespin is on green, which is available, then you can come up to the table. I might be working with one child. I might be working with a group of children, but you are free to sit down. You can join us. I will help you at the same time or answer the questions that you have. But kids need signals, and we need to ensure that they know what those signals are. So how do I get help? What do I do when I'm done? Those are questions that truly need to be answered proactively. In terms of checking in, when you check in for centers, many people around the country, I will see that they use some type of chart. They will have, pictures like you see in the upper left-hand corner. They might have clips like the middle one. They use a grouping where group 1 is the Tigers or group 2 is, these 4 people, and they're going here, and everyone rotates through. My only stumbling block with that is we know in our hearts that every child they can't all do the same things in the same amount of time. So how do we ensure everyone can be successful? Adam's going to be the first one done. Adam's going to be over there waving his arm, I'm done, or he's going to have done everything on the I'm done list and be up telling you I'm done and I did everything I can do when I'm done. The hard thing about him is you look at his work and it's awesome. It's almost like he's in the wrong grade. Being proactive says, wow, Adam 1 does not need to be on the checklist. He's very accountable, and if he is, I need to let him be so that I can place more emphasis on the kids who need me more. I can be available to help them. So I know lots of people say, well, everyone has to check in. I am of the belief that if the ones that can do it, leave them alone. Don't have them check in. Let them choose. Finish what you're doing and you can move to one that's open. I do like something like the middle one only because it lets kids know if there's 4 people there, don't go there. Over 4, it gets louder in the classroom. It becomes unmanageable. There might not be enough materials if there's more than 4 people at that particular table or space or tray or whatever, however you set up the areas where they do centers. But if they had a visual of, okay, there's 4 people there, I can't go there, I can make a different choice right now. That's a good thing. But in terms of accountability of what did you get done and where is it, do you have a checklist, that type of board, save it for the ones that need it most. Teach the ones that are independent to stay independent. Teach the ones that aren't independent to be independent, and pretty soon we won't even need a chart. We'll be able to let them choose. For myself, having been a K-1-2 looping teacher at one time, I know keeping the same kids for 3 years, I know that in kindergarten it was a ton of work. Halfway through 1st grade, I just felt the success of how hard we had worked, because for the other half of 1st grade and all of 2nd grade, the kids chose all of their centers every day. You do not have to go to all of them. For me, I mark some of them must-dos, so for the kids that can't do all of it, you can at least get your must-dos done, and then you can make a choice among the other centers. But it is, totally up to you as a teacher. As teachers, last year I was looking at some research that talked about shared teacher traits across the United States. And basically it listed 2 personality traits that most elementary teachers possess. One of them is we're nurturing. There's no surprise to that. I rarely meet a teacher who's not a nurturing type of person. But the second one talked about us being controlling. And I do see that in education. I think so many of us, between nurturing and controlling, we forget that we're great teachers when they don't need us anymore. But if you're nurturing and controlling, it's hard to let go of them at times. We want to knock them out of the nest, not keep them in the nest. So as they learn to be independent, allowing them to do that and continue on without you as long as they're making good choices. Storage, keep it to a minimal. you know, I'm always jealous if I walk into a room and I see tables where kids can go to the centers because I never had that kind of space. In fact, the bottom right corner of this picture is one of my old classrooms. It was taken up by a long counter where the trays are sitting right now, and it was really, really hard to designate any space as a center type of space. And instead, it was grab a tray and fit anywhere that you can go. I love the idea of the handled buckets that are up in the left-hand corner. Certainly, all your materials are in there. Take it, go, work on your center, bring it back. And so how we organize it does matter, especially if these are going to be long-term. If one of your centers is words, and in words one of the choices is whiteboards, having those whiteboards all in one box, having markers that work, having socks or small erasers, whatever you use to erase the board, having that there. Also having the spray that cleans the boards so that the question doesn't come up, well, this one is a mess, all of the ink wouldn't come off of it. It's just all about being proactive in the way that we organize the space and keeping it to a minimum. If I have 5 different choices for the way that you practice words and you can choose one of them today, then I'll add another one, take away one in another few weeks. But we don't need to constantly, every week, change materials in and out. They get used to what the materials are and they can make their choice among the materials that are available. So storage, deciding on center choices, and always a tough topic for me. People will ask me, well, what kind of centers do you set up? And I've talked about the word center, but without a doubt, I am a believer that it is really, really important to ensure that there's time on text every day for every child. When I visit schools, one of the first questions I ask is for teachers to think about the lowest child in their class and to tell me, outside of the time that you spend reading with them or reading to them, outside of that time, how many minutes a day does a child spend engaged with text? And over the years, I've had some really honest teachers tell me 0, 5, 10 minutes. And my question is always the same back to them. Is there any way that a child can become a better reader if they are only engaged with text for that short a period of time by themselves? And the answer is absolutely not. They cannot become better readers. I'm sure over the years there was a best-selling poster. It's still around the United States. But I remember one year at the International Reading Association it sold out. But it asked, list 10 ways to become a better reader. And it was similar to what you see on the screen. They all said read. So before Daily 5, way back when 4-block was kind of an up-and-coming solution to a framework for your classroom, they talked about 3 ways to read. Reading the pictures, teaching kids to read the words, and teaching kids that you can retell what you hear or gain information from those pictures, especially now with the push on informational text. We see so many times that kids can gain, one picture is of the earth cut apart in 3rd grade, and one one side of it is the whole paragraph about the layers of the earth. And I can name the layers by looking at the picture a lot faster than I can name the layers by reading the whole entire paragraph. And so we gain a lot of information by looking at pictures, but teaching kids that, modeling it, setting them loose to practice it, building Smarty Power, that stamina type of on-task behavior that we're looking for. But to me, it's invaluable. I have to have a book center, a book area during center time so that kids are actively engaged with text. That center, I think of it as a living room or a space that you would want to be. Kids who come to school ready to read come from homes where they were read to. A nation of readers, that big study told us that, but we all really already knew that. But when you were read to at home, what were the experiences that created a child that wanted to be read to, that interacted with books? And that comes down to, was it comfortable? Was it inviting? Did I get to choose the book? And all of those things that kids get at home that creates kids who love books, we need to give the kids who might not have had that at home. So we look and we ask about the space. I love to see comfortable seating. I know it's not always easy in classrooms. In my own district, we weren't allowed to have anything upholstered because we had several things going on there in terms of health issues, but certainly around the country, I see people just get pieces of squares. I've seen more beach towels or blankets over desks where kids have little flashlights and they're interacting with their books, but I call it the living room. I want it to have comfortable seating in the living room because that's what I want at home. Books can be arranged by topics, authors, fiction, nonfiction, genres. One of the most visited in K-1 classrooms, a basket that I help teachers to create, are the ones that you've already read. Because if I teach you there's 3 ways to read, and one of them is retelling text, then you have to have heard the text before. You have to have interacted with that text. So keeping one, purple is my favorite color, so I usually say grab a purple bin, tell the kids, or whatever color is your favorite, and tell the children, these are books I've read to you. They're our favorites. You can always go back and retell or reread these books to yourself. So arranging the books, not overdoing the books. I'm going to show pictures in a minute, and there's several I love and several that I even wonder if I couldn't cut down a little bit. But books are available by reading level if during that time you plan to get kids to practice the reading that you've done in your own small group. I'm a huge advocate of letting kids read whatever they want. Whatever will get them sitting and engaging with text. They can read the pictures in the magazine. They can read the words if they can. They can retell, several of the poems or songs. In kindergarten, they were retelling the alphabet with alphabet cards available in the book corner back in October. So it's anything that engages kids with text. Rotate books in your library so that the students' interests stay high. We've all met a child, you say, well, you could get a book, hon, and sit down, and they say, oh, I read them all. Well, there's 1,000 books over there, so perhaps if we didn't put them all out. So when I think of pictures, the upper left-hand corner, I like the books that face out. I think we see so many more of our boys go to where the visual is. The books on the bookcase behind those children in the picture, I worry about those because if I'm not a reader, I'm non-reader, or I'm a struggling reader, all I see are these bindings looking at me, and people say, well, you can choose one. Well, they all look about the same to me. So I do try to make it so it's more the types of boxes that you see on the right-hand side on the bottom, although I think there's a lot there. And I think those were leveled books, if I remember correctly. But I'm looking for inviting space. I love the idea of sitting in the pool during the ocean theme, or having what looked like a garden house set up. I still remember how much I love my loft, and I know lofts kind of went out of school as a dangerous piece of equipment, although I do still see some. And in fact, one of the classrooms I work in right now in a city, several of the classrooms have lofts, and I still see how excited the kids are to go under that loft or up on top of it and read a book. Truly, probably my favorite bookcase is the one in the middle. All of them facing forward. You can quickly flip through, but it's all about the organization that you have planned for what is the purpose of having that center. But then also realizing if I set up a book center, what kind of questions have to be answered proactively to make that center work? How do I choose a book? We've all seen kids go to the book center, stack up 1,000,000 books, and say, I'm done. How do you choose a book that's right for you? Talking to kids, lining up books and saying, sometimes I look at them and think, I want to know about polar bears. And I choose that book. I'm not always sure I can read every word, but I know I can look at the pictures and I can get information. So choosing a book. How do we do that? You might have the, 5 fingertip rules, where if a child picks up a book and opens it, reads the words on one page, if you miss one word, that's okay. If you get to 2 words, it's still a good choice for you. But if you miss 3 words on one page, you might need help reading this. So if you have a buddy in your reading, but if you plan to read alone, you might want to choose a different one unless you plan on reading the pictures. So that's a lesson beforehand, so the kids don't feel like, well, I can't read any of these books. Well, what are 3 ways to read the book, and how do we pick a good book if we plan on reading the words? Does it have to be quiet during, center time, especially in the book center? Does that need to be a quiet area? And you have to decide that. Myself, I can take a lot of noise during center time, but I also was always an inclusion teacher and would tell you that the kids can't take a lot of noise. And in the end, that's what matters. So I would look at that and probably say, you know what, it needs to be decently quiet. Kids, they won't know, well, what's quiet and what's loud is harder for kids. So coming up with, some type of chart that shows them that. What if you read with a buddy? Do I have to teach anything of that? Of course you do. How do you get a buddy? How do you ask someone to read with you? How do you reply when someone does ask you to read with them? Where will you sit? How will you sit? Answering all those questions. So if it comes to the voice level, do you have a voice level, thermometer type of thing, or do you go over with the kids? I always say number 1 is the spy voice, and when you are talking like a spy, you don't want everyone to hear you, so it becomes pss, 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 pss. And if you're talking like that, to yourself when you're reading a book, or to someone in a center, sometimes when we partner read so that the other person can understand us, we might need to use a regular voice. But it wouldn't be our step-up voice, the same voice we use in a big crowd. So going over those choices with kids. If they partner read, do we give them some type of coaching tool? I wrote this one last year sometime for a district I work with, but when you're sitting with a child, and do the 5-second rule. When someone's looking at a word, don't tell them what the word is. Give them a couple of seconds. Ask them, do you want help? If they say no, then be quiet while they try to figure out the word. If they do want help, you might use the same types of strategies, and I'll go forward and then I'll come back, as the ones you see on the bookmark, the ones that I've taught you, looking at the picture, jumping over a word, reading on, coming back and reread it. It's not skip a word. It's jump over, read on, come back and reread. We want strategies that work for kids. Sound it out is not a great strategy past 1st grade, because unless it's vowel, consonant, vowel, it really doesn't work to sound it out unless you know all the rules, or you know all of the words beyond that are much longer than consonant, vowel, consonant. We need to teach them looking for small parts like a prefix or a suffix, or looking for a word inside of it, stretching it out by syllables. But telling them, when you coach people, you want to say to them, what word do you think would work there? Or why don't you try jumping over, read on, come back and reread it? In the end, you could say, I can help you with the word, or do you want me to tell you the word? But you've got to give people time, and you have to learn how to coach as a child that reads with other children. And that's going to be of a benefit for them throughout their school career, whenever they're working with other students, to be able to say, I will help you, I will coach you, I want to always give you the answers. And so the tools that we set up for success, if you're a person, and there's been so much of a focus in the United States on nonfiction, well, every child is capable of learning some of the features of nonfiction, the cutaways, the type of print. I always think in a K-1 classroom, it was a multi-age classroom, I had a big book and it had a bold word in it. And when I got to the bold word, I said to the group, boys and girls, I think someone's pen broke. Look how dark this word is compared to the rest of them. And I can still see a little 5-year-old raising his hand and saying, no, Miss Whyte, that's not, that's the way it's supposed to be. Because when you see that, that means you ain't even going to know this word. And in lots of ways, that's exactly what it means. It means that this is new vocabulary, or that, you know, the type of print can signal I'm important. Make sure you take note of me. But the reality is, while it's an understanding at a more basic level, they can learn those features of print that help them be successful in reading. So if you're looking to teach features, or you're looking to teach decoding strategies like around the bookmark, then you purposely might choose a bin of books and say, today we're only looking at the pictures, or we're learning to, I've marked some words and I want you to try to stretch them out. You might say with a book, I'm going to ask you to look to see if there's different types of print in this book. But those things you teach them should transfer to that book center. And that book center should become probably one of the staples, foundation pieces of a classroom, instead of, oh, if you don't like anything else, or if you're done your centers, you can go to the book area. I want the book area to be almost the first thing that kids think about when they get to choose centers, that it becomes one of those centers that they like so much they would choose it. And so as we look to setting up centers, you know, with the book center, what can be there? What kind of things can be in the book center? There's just so many things that we could put there that allow kids to interact with print, whether it be pictures or print or high frequency phrases or repetitive types of things. I love when the kids read maps, because I tell them all the time, you think you're not a good reader, but you found that place. So you must be a good reader, because reading means interpreting print. When you interpret a map, you are reading the map. They love comic books. They like travel guides. In my travels, I'm always picking up brochures for kids and things. And so it truly is thinking of what would they be interested in, what would they want, and then placing it there, because we need kids who are definitely intrigued by print and want to interact with print. That's how kids become readers. So to me, that was an example of what a foundation center would look like. Remember, as you're looking to your centers, there really are some basic premises that we have to look to and say, I can make them successful if I make sure that I'm proactive, that I lay the foundation that builds success. And that is, I didn't expect it. I taught it. I became a looping teacher because I would teach them and then send them on to a different grade. I want to teach them and keep them. And taking that first month of school, the first 5 weeks, and really, really laying the foundation blocks and cementing them, not just throwing them out there and hoping that they hold up the house, but taking the time to place them and to cement them will build that foundation of independence and responsibility that we so desperately want from children, that we teach before we expect, that we choose centers carefully. We practice what you teach during the day. So if I'm teaching something today, I would want that practice to be in the center tomorrow, or maybe for the rest of the week if it's a long-term foundation skill that I want to make sure, ensure that every child has before we move on. So when people will say, well, I think next week I'm going to put this in the center, I always wonder how you can do that, because in my mind, I want to put what they struggle with. I want to put supports to what they struggle with. I want to put more practice for the ones that haven't mastered it yet. I want to put those things that they're having trouble with now in those centers tomorrow or the next day. And again, not change the format of the center, just plug it into either a book center or a writing center or a word center, and have those same foundation centers all year long. Remember that centers build the 21st century skills imperative to future learning. That's collaboration, communication, critical thinking. Get them to think it out. I often tell the kids the best strategy when you need help is to close your eyes and ask yourself, have I ever seen anything like this before? What do I know about it? What do I remember about it? Getting kids to think. It certainly is a challenge for us. I left kindergarten to teach 5th grade and still remember the horror that I felt when kids would raise their hand and say, how many sentences do I have to write? Or the big one in 5th grade, will this count for a grade? Those kind of questions come from kids who have not been taught to think for themselves. And so how do we get them communicating, working together? Schools of the future don't have desks. They have tables. They have tables because kids are going to be expected to work together, to collaborate on projects, to come up with new solutions to the problems that the world faces. And so certainly teaching communication skills early, teaching them what do you do in a group? What do you do when somebody doesn't do what you want them to do? What do you do when somebody's telling you what to do? Those all are questions that need to be answered proactively so that the kids know what to do by themselves instead of coming to you. Centers are fun. I rarely, if ever, have walked into a classroom and said out loud, boys and girls, you get to go to centers, and had kids say, I hate centers. Instead, whenever you mention centers, kids act like they're going to a party. And how exciting for us that there's something that kids love to do. We ought to utilize it to the nth degree. We ought to make every attempt to ensure that they have choice, that learning is fun, that they remember, we're not here to torture you. You're here to learn, and learning can be fun. And when you are given choice, choice is motivating. So if you're given choice and independent time to work on things, that can be a lot of fun. Utilize that as much as you can with young kids. So I hope you got something in this short seminar that you can use in your own classroom. This is a seminar I do around the country this year. I still have dates in New York and Louisiana coming up. It is a whole day seminar, so it is hard to think of what are the points that you want to stick in just a short webinar format. But I sure hope you get something you can use in your own classroom. Faulkner, I'm going to turn it back over to you and to see if we have any questions.
Sounds good. Thanks, Donna. I hope everybody's enjoyed today's presentation, and I am going to give you all a minute or two to submit any last questions via that text window on your screen. And in the meantime, I would like to mention a few things. Actually, Donna, if you wouldn't mind jumping a slide ahead. As a thank you for attending today's webinar, we would like to offer you a 10% discount off SDPD resources, events, and on-site training. Typically in the past, we've offered a 10% savings off of public events, and we've actually expanded that to PD resources on Crystal Springs books, so shopcsb.com, and also on-site training. If your school is interested in maybe having Donna come to the school or do some training with Donna or another presenter, if you give us a call and use that web code W012015 within the next month, you could actually save 10% off of that as well. And as Donna was saying, she's going to be some upcoming kindergarten conferences: Ohio, Texas, Alabama, Kansas through the end of February. Also at the New England Conference for Pre-K through 3 teachers in April as well. And Donna will also be at, I'm not sure if at both or one or the other, but at the SDE National Conferences this year. They're in Las Vegas and Orlando this summer, and we'd love to see you there as well. And again,
Faulkner, I'm actually going to have the privilege of speaking at the National I Teach Kindergarten in Vegas, the National I Teach First, and the National TI. I'm going to be moving around for several days out there.
I was going to say, that sounds like you're going to be there all week.
Yep, see as many folks as I can while I'm out there, so yes.
Sounds good. And just a reminder again, Donna is available to come to the school or your district for customized training to meet your needs. And for more information about PD services, events, training, or resources, give us a shout at 877-388-2054 or visit sde.com. Please follow us on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest under SDE4Educators with the number 4. And we're also on LinkedIn. You can search for Staff Development for Educators. And I also am sending out right now, I'm shooting out the link to Donna's website, thesmartyzone.com, and we'd love for you to go visit her there as well. And just a reminder that live attendees of the webinar will receive a follow-up email, hopefully within 48 hours, that will include a link to a printable certificate of participation for this webinar, and it will also have a link to the archived recording of the webinar that you can watch at any time. Now, thanks for your patience. I'm going to jump to some of these questions, and let's see. Krista was asking if we were able to get the slides to download after the webinar. We actually don't make the slides themselves available for download. Unfortunately, with the internet, things end up going all over the world very quickly. But you certainly, as I said, are welcome to watch the archive as often as you would like after those 48 hours, and also the materials that are in there as well. I know Donna has a lot of that on her website, and I would suggest going there as well. We had a question, Donna, and this was during your book centers discussion, and they were asking if you could mention how that might look in a math class.
If I was just teaching math, and I love centers during math, Faulkner, I'm glad someone asked, because certainly when we teach a basic concept, we know some of them are going to know what we say before we say it. Some of them are going to follow along and be able to go out and practice on their own, and some of them don't even know what we were just saying. They don't even know we were just talking. And so finding ways to make that smaller in a math class, and I would love to see books included as one of those centers in math class, because there's so many wonderful math books. And it's the same that when you're looking at the M&M book, you can read the pictures, you can retell it sometimes when a teacher has told it to you, and getting them to really look at math as also literacy. And then when you think about writing for math, there can be journaling of, draw the story problem and then state it in the journal. And so I think that those same types of centers can be placed into a math-only classroom. I even think of recently I saw someone using vocabulary during math time, and they were practicing math vocabulary, which we know is imperative to some of our state testing around the country. So I do think that they can be flipped in, and that we can look at multiple ways of introducing and practicing our math concepts.
Excellent. Catherine was saying hello from Maine. She's wondering if that the center cards might be available to print out either on our resource page or on your site.
They are at my site, actually. There are, unfortunately, just the ones that you see are just part of a set that I published several years ago. There are actually, I want to say something like 120 cards that cover 6 different foundations. Reading with Buddies, there's task cards for that, writing task cards, center task cards, but they are available at my site. Faulkner, it's thesmartyzone.com.
Yep. All right, and this is for someone must be coming to see you. She was wondering if you're going to have your CDs in San Marcos at your Texas trainings.
I am, and I just came from San Marcos. I did the 2nd and 3rd grade presentation down there last week, and how privileged I am to go back there and be there in a couple of weeks from now for the pre-KK. I will have my CDs. Crystal Springs Book Table will be carrying my products as well.
Excellent. Let's see. I had a question. Any good suggestions on foreign language centers in grades K through 5 here? And I don't know if it changes with that range, or if you might be able to speak to that.
Faulkner, in upstate New York, we don't see the range of languages that some of our public city schools or particular areas in the United States do. But I know that when I look at language, the biggest holdback for kids, again, is vocabulary. That we can say, well, they can't learn to read. Well, you cannot read what you don't understand in language. So language building centers become imperative. And when you look at language building, I love to use websites like, there's one actually, and I will stick it up in the follow-up email for the question part too. But it's Boggles World, ESL. It's BOGGLES, WORLD, Bogglesworld.com just has tons of great activity for acquiring language, which is at the heart of reading and writing. Before you can read it, you really have to have oral language, and so developing those oral language skills. I will try to put a couple of those resources into the question and answers when I send them back, that will be available to the participants later on, Faulkner.
Excellent. Mary was asking if you might be able to have give any suggestions for writing centers for younger children where her students are pre-K and many of them are struggling just to write their names.
Well, first again, as we teach them 3 ways to read, we also need to teach them there's 3 ways to write. When you draw a picture of a tree, I interpret that having meaning. And writing is to put something that someone else interprets as having meaning. So convincing them that the drawings are also have meaning. And you can start with language type centers. You know, you can't write what you can't say, and many of our children, again, struggle with language. But if you take old, you know, birthday cards, Christmas cards, I search on Google for strange pictures, funny pictures, weird pictures, and I get the kids to talk about the pictures, because writing is talking about the pictures that are in your head. Before you have, you know, before you can write to abstract pictures in your head, you have to be able to write to concrete pictures. And so being able to just label things, you start with pictures, you talk about labeling those pictures or scribbling above them to make it look like words, and that's where writing begins. So make sure that we show them that you can write the word, that's one way to write. If you don't write words yet, you can smarty write, make your best attempts. Sometimes that's scribble, sometimes it's one letter for the whole word, the initial sound. It's your best attempt at making what you think looks like a word, or you can draw me a picture that I can interpret. So it's really walking them through those stages of writing. Writing, one of my favorite topics when I do at a lot of state workshops and out at the nationals, just love to work with small children in writing. But start with the concrete.
Thanks. Kimberly was asking, since pre-K centers are the primary form of learning besides group and circle time, should she make the center choices narrowed to 2 to 3 in the morning and 2 to 3 in the afternoon for full day pre-K? She said her pre-K students are sometimes seem overwhelmed and she can't get to all their questions.
Well, I would say, again, that's the nature of having centers that are not foundational, that change every week and need new directions. When they need new directions, the kids can't hang on to all the new directions. If it's a craft and it's something they've not made before, that's new to them, and giving them the steps or the procedure takes up too much space in their, you know, short-term memories. And so it's looking at, okay, if we have a foundation center, I was in a pre-K the other day, and one of the foundation centers was blocks and then kind of drawing whatever you developed with the blocks in that center, and that becomes a foundation center. So if I have that and I was adding something new, I would feel more comfortable. So if they're new centers, I would say 2 or 3. And you can make it so, you know, people say, well, there's too many kids in a center. Well, if you only have 2 or 3 centers, make multiple copies of the same center. So I have a writing center over here with 4, and I have another writing center with the same materials over here that has 4. We're still teaching kids that collaboration and communication that we want, and we're able to, you know, minimize the number of centers we're putting out. When they can handle it, we add more choice. If they can't handle it, you pull in that choice. So.
Okay, I think we've got time for a couple more. Answer this one, and you'll be a rich person. Any tips for teaching kids in K to stay on task and avoid distracting their peers?
Again, I think that responsibility can be taught. I mean, what does it look like? What does it sound like? Why don't we, you know, bother our peers when we do? What is the consequence of bothering our peers? Also remembering their age, though. I mean, we're all, human beings are social creatures, and our little ones are social creatures, and until they learn some of that self-control we so desperately want, but it is a matter of that rehearsal over and over again that reminds them, you know, we have to stay working on ours, and not just saying, I want you to stay here and work, but building that smarty power over time. We might only make it 2 minutes without bothering anyone else, without going off task, but that's 2 minutes today. We're going to try for 3 tomorrow, and eventually working up to that longer period of time instead of expecting it up front and then being very disappointed when it doesn't happen each day.
Okay, we've got, oh, we can get one more. One last question, I think. What basic centers would you recommend for pre-K or junior kindergarten?
You know, I think it depends where you are in the United States. You know, so many people have made pre-K more academic than I personally feel it should be. In pre-K, I want language centers. I want kids to experience, pictures of things that they can label and expand their oral vocabulary before we start getting them to have a reading and writing vocabulary. I want puzzles. I think puzzles help kids to see things three-dimensionally, that it develops critical thinking. And then, yeah, I'm in some pre-Ks across this country where I'm told, well, it needs to be more academic. And so depending on where you are and what's allowed, I think that we look to the centers that build those skills long term instead of worrying the immediacy of the skills for success in school. First has to be built your love of learning. First has to be built your enthusiasm for learning, your ability to work independently. It's hard to do both at the same time. I think it becomes a full-time task to teach collaboration and communication skills to young kids, and that's where I believe the focus should be in pre-K.
Thanks, Donna. I think we are probably about out of time. I did want to let everybody know that I actually just chatted out the savings code along with a link that if you click on that, that'll actually bring you directly to Donna's books that are on Crystal Springs Books as well. And so you could just click on that and take a look at those books this afternoon after we conclude. And I do hope everybody enjoyed today's presentation. Again, that code for saving 10% off of any of our PD resources, on-site training, and our events is W012015, and that's good for a month. I hope everybody enjoyed today's presentation. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for joining me, and I hope our paths cross somewhere across the United States. Thank you.
Everybody have a great rest of the day. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.